This is a short video on the capacitor that's inside a Wayne 1/3 horsepower pedestal pump. It's a model number PTU30. And as you can see, the capacitor in some recent flooding we had, well, a neighbor had, because I'm fixing this pump for him, that cap died a very, very violent death. And yeah, so I just need to replace it. Because looking at the windings in it, even though these use a fairly dark colored enamel, that is the normal color of the enamel on the wires in this thing. So I also don't smell, you know, hot motor death stinky that you would smell if the windings had gotten cooked. So yeah, just the capacitor should replace this. I'm just making this video so that way you know what size capacitor to get if you also need to fix one of these, because as you can see, it vented right where the print is, because that's the side of the capacitor that was open, because it was either, because the rest of the capacitor was either pressed into the windings or the outside case, so this is where the weak point was. And having lanced the boil, it is a 25 microfarad 250 volt cap. What I'm probably going to do is replace this with a 10 and a 15, or 3/8, or say 2/8 and a 9 if I can find one, or a 7 and 8 and a 10 mic cap, and probably of a higher potential rating, like 330 or 450 volts, just because this capacitor got, you know, violently hot from an extended runtime, because ordinarily, even though it says continuous duty on the motor, where is it? Yeah, see, time rating continuous. Not so much. And a week later, plus or minus, here's the replacement cap in the process of being installed. What I'm going to do is solder both connections and then heat shrink them. There are the two joints soldered. There's the heat shrunk joints. There's the replacement capacitor mounted. Just some Chinesium CBB60 Shufeng. Don't know what the tones are, but Chinese phonetics. And of course I have the spec plate, or spec printing on the capacitor where it's visible without having to twist the cap. And one thing of note you may have to do, or will probably have to do if you're fixing one of these pumps, is there's a sleeve of heat shrink that's on the mounting screws in order to prevent issues with eddy currents and what have you in the motor stator assembly. That heat shrink is quite thick, and you're going to mangle it both getting... Hang on, bloody mosquitoes. You're going to mangle it both trying to get the screws out and when putting the screws back in. So what you're probably better off doing is cutting that heat shrink off and just putting a single wrap of electrical tape like I have done here, because it's thinner and accomplishes the same thing. And here's the reassembled pump. It lives. Also, yes, I am running this on another side transformer, so even though it's getting the 115 volts-ish, it's actually about 57 odd volts to ground, so it's not quite as dangerous. Plus it is grounded, and it's solidly grounded through here, through the transformer. Because this isn't an isolating transformer, it's a center tap ground, or because that transformer was made in England, it's what they call center tapped earth, because the Brits have weird terminology. But yes, it lives.